Thank you very much. And I'd also like to welcome you here today. Gosh, I see my picture there. Let's see if I can advance beyond that. Next, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to provide some brief opening remarks for our workshop today. We're very happy that you were able to join us. Yes, I'm Theresa Mullin, the Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives in the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And so I want to begin with just giving a bit of background on this. And we begin with our recognition that there are over 7,000 plus rare diseases and that have been identified to date, and more are being identified. And that this total number of Americans living with rare diseases is now on the order of 25 to 30 million. And so quite a number of people just in the US alone. And that although progress has been made in diagnosing and treating a variety of rare diseases, there are still, most diseases have no treatments, no approved treatments. And as regulators, we at FDA certainly have been working with rare disease patients, investigators, companies, but mostly one at a time. And what we see is that there are a lot of struggles with the same kinds of challenges being faced by many of these parties. Vast knowledge gaps about the natural course of disease, and the small dispersed patient populations around the world make it harder to conduct randomized trials. The quality of submissions that we get can suffer because of these problems. And so this overall effort of the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator was begun to try to come up with some better solutions and try to address some of these problems. So next slide now. And so this is a basic kind of construct that we've been working with, trying to target some very challenging areas in rare disease drug development. And those have been centering, our efforts and centered around three: characterization of the disease, including, what's known about the disease, are there well-developed tests, what's the natural history, the natural course of disease, what causes the disease, getting patient and perspective on treatments and disease, what are the disease impacts that matter the most to patients, and what is the current landscape of available treatments. And in terms of clinical study for new treatments, are there investigational products to be studied? What designs for trials would be most effective and produce the most reliable evidence? What's the plan for enrolling patients? Are they going to be able to get access to the trials? And I'm going to give a quick update on where we are with some of these efforts, and I'm going to start going right to left. So we end up with the focus of today's meeting, which is on the disease characterization. And so beginning then with the Rare Disease Cures Clinical Trial Network, this effort was motivated by observations such as rare disease drug development requires often use of novel, potentially complex trial designs and novel endpoints, ones for which there is not a lot of experience. Patients are typically few in number and geographically dispersed due to the limited number of patients and knowledgeable treating physicians. The trials may be conducted in only a few centers around the world. And patients are often unaware of where the opportunities are for these trials and often have difficulty getting access to the trials. And so this this component of Clinical Trials Network, the vision here is to develop a trial-ready network of investigators and clinical trial sites for rare diseases to provide a sort of fast-track implementation path for evaluating promising therapies and a standardized approach for planning and conducting. So to date, what have we done? Well, in May of 2020, FDA issued a request for information, and this was really to help us inform future planning and collaboration, not wanting to duplicate efforts here, and there's a lot of trial network efforts underway. And this RFI was to request a public input on practical steps and successful approaches to date relating to the startup, the implementation, and the sustainment of global trial networks, including specific considerations for establishing these networks for a range of rare diseases. And the next area I want to talk about has to do with getting the patient's perspective on disease treatment and disease, what it's like to live with the disease. And in this case, we need to understand what are the aspects of the disease that matter the most to the patient. Well, how can those impacts be measured, and what's amenable to treatment, and what would constitute a meaningful change in those measures? And what's the landscape of currently available treatments? What would a patient consider to be the burdens that matter the most? What risks would be acceptable, and what alternatives of trade-offs of benefits and risks might be acceptable to the patient? And in this area, a lot of this work, we would like to see development of standard clinical outcome assessment measures. Now, these outcome assessment measures really are to go at different kinds of endpoints that might be appropriate depending on the impact of the disease or treatment that we're trying to measure. But developing these can be really labor intensive and resource intensive, and it may not be possible or outside the reach of rare disease development programs. And so FDA is piloting a grant program to try to develop standard core measures that really could serve this purpose and be available at little or no cost to the public. And so what have we done to date here? Well, last year we announced 2 of the grant awards that are in areas that are relevant to rare disease drugs and rare disease patient populations. One is clinical outcome assessments to measure acute pain for therapeutics to be developed in infants and young children, preverbal children, focusing on ages newborn to 2 years old, where we don't have good instruments today. The other relevant to rare disease populations is the work being done by Northwestern University. This is a project to develop measures to evaluate physical functioning, and the intention is to be available and applicable across a wide range of chronic conditions, including rare diseases. And this is going to be assessed in terms of patient-reported outcomes and physical function performance measures. We've also issued a new opportunity, a new funding announcement that has this year. And this is focusing on we're requesting applications in a couple of targeted areas that are focused on rare conditions: fluid overload and nephrotic syndrome, age-appropriate domains for pediatric daily functioning, mechanics of swallowing and speech from infancy to adulthood, and treatment effects in systemic sclerosis are specifically named as areas of great interest to us in the funding opportunity announcement. So we hope that we'll be getting applications. That closed last week, and so we'll be taking a look at what we've received, and hopefully we'll have some good applications that will be able to advance in those areas. And the third component of this, of our focus, is related to characterization of the disease. And here, in particular, we're focusing on, well, what do we know about the disease of interest? How variable is it? What are the main defining problems? How variable is it across the patients who have this condition in the population? What are the defined tests for this condition? And what does the natural history look like? I mean, how does it change over time? Can we quantify this? How variable are the symptoms and experiences of patients with the disease? And what are the implications for trial design? And so in this case, we saw a real need for an efficient, comprehensive characterization of natural history for a given rare disease and targeted for clinical development, and a need for rigorous analysis to it, with the attention to established data quality standards in order to be most useful for trial design and regulatory review, and a need for a standardized platform for studying natural history for rare disease that will allow us to have this sustainable approach and get away from the fragmentation that we've been seeing and are concerned with. And this is to provide a disease-neutral background data framework for the conduct of these natural history studies. And a disease-specific needs would then be layered on top of that framework that would allow a more rapid and standardized way to customize it for the development of a natural history studies for any given disease. And so what's been accomplished so far? We're going to hear a lot more about this today, and these are the accomplishments of c-path and NORD and their collaborations. And so briefly, and as I said, you'll hear more, but the project was launched a little over a year ago in September of 2019, and open for data sharing. And they currently have over 40 rare disease data sets in-house, 10 disease areas, and they are using that to design the analytics platform. This concept of the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator data and analytics platform has been discussed by c-path and their collaborators with hundreds of stakeholders at this point through public meetings, webinars, focus groups, and one-on-one interviews to understand what the community really would like to see in an analytics platform. And those stakeholders have included industry, regulators, patient groups, academics, individual patients, and the learnings are being used now to try to make the platform design to be as useful as possible to as many as possible. They're also using that feedback to sort of finalize the data governance and data sharing policies to encourage data sharing that makes it easier both to get data into the platform and to get access to that data and accelerate the ability to share and use that rare disease data. And working with the FAIR principles to share that data as simply as possible while still respecting the needs of the data contributors and maximizing the value to the platform. And given the heterogeneity of rare disease conditions and the data that's being brought in, they're also developing a strategy and standards and ontologies to aid in maximizing the data integration, usability, and searchability in view of those challenges. And building a series of prototypes that demonstrate how the data could be searched and used in the analytic platform. And they're also building examples of how that data could be used. You're going to be hearing more about that in the workshop today. And then on terms of what's coming next, and you'll hear about this too, opening the data and analytics platform for initial queries and data sharing. And an early version of that is anticipated in early in 2021, and there'll be a preview, I understand, of this workshop. A provision of standardized feedback to those early contributors of their data around the structure and the format of the data with recommendations for how they might collect the data in the future to really maximize its utility, its accessibility, and analyzability. Setting up collaborations with at least another data partner collecting information across multiple diseases and collaborations with other entities who work on standards and ontologies that could help with the issues around rare disease data, and completing the current projects and engaging in some additional projects to develop tools and analyses to accelerate rare disease drug development. And so just to reiterate the objectives of today's virtual workshop, there's going to be a discussion to explain how the RDCA-DAP will work to accelerate rare disease drug development, demonstrate how the platform's first year and progress, and how it can be used to help search and use data, case studies for how the data can be used to support drug development, and then ways to share and sharing ways to get involved, and hopefully more stakeholders will get involved in the benefits of doing that and engaging in the RDCA-DAP. And with that, I thank you again for joining us today.